Live. Welcome everyone to yet another San Diego local. Uh, it's a local San Diego low carb event, but it's streaming worldwide. So another change with COVID, right? So we've got a really cool new presenter here from down under, from Australia, called Andrei Obradovic. And we'll hear from him a little later. But to start with, the guy that really started the San Diego chapter of this thing is Jeff Cotterman. And I'm going to hand over to him now so that he can open this thing. He's going to give you a quick talk, and then we'll get on with Andrei. So take it away, Jeff.
Thanks, Doug. Hey, welcome. I am so excited that we get to have these meetings virtually. It's been too long since people have come in to the Tri-System Center and just kind of fellowshipped, kind of gotten together. It's just something to hang out with Doug and Pam and Dr. Ben when he's here in the summer, Dr. Brian, who started this whole San Diego chapter thing, and now with Dr. Kristen with him, with low carb MDs in San Diego. It's great to get together face to face, but we can't do that. So now that we're doing it virtually, and the cool thing about that is you don't have to be in San Diego to join this meeting and join it live and interact with some of these great minds who are on the cutting edge of this low carb lifestyle. So for those of you that this is your first time, I just mentioned a lot of names. I'm just going to go through really quick. So Doug Reynolds is the founder of Low Carb USA. If you're watching on his website, he is a worldwide organization. He is an advocate of low carb, high fat, and the low carb lifestyle. He's brought speakers internationally all through the world to these conferences and events. And then to my right, we've got Dr. Brian Lenskes and Dr. Kristen Bear, and they are kind of the physicians heading up this Low Carb USA chapter here in San Diego, California. And they have a practice known as Low Carb MD. And they have been helping people do just amazing things metabolically through their medical practice. This is, I think, modern medicine at its finest. It's no longer this get in line, run of the mill, here's your prescription, get out. It's a lifestyle, and it's supervised by medical practitioners. I do what our guest speaker does here partly, I don't know if I exactly do it, but we have a low carb centered, medically supervised exercise center where people come who are primarily concerned with metabolic health, and we put them through a specific workout. And today I'm going to warm up the crowd, right? As people are coming in now, as people are getting settled in for the meeting. You know, we always got the latecomers that are coming in from their hike or their walk, or they're having a late breakfast. I'm warming up the crowd so nobody misses Andrei. I'm going to talk a little bit about protein synthesis. And I'm going to share my screen right now and just give you a little short talk. Let's see here. There we go. It's taken me a while to share my screen. So Tri-System is the name of the center. And let's see if I can open up the whole thing. There we go. All right. So this is update 3, and these meetings are recorded that are virtual. We've done 2 live updates where I've kind of just updated the latest relevant to nutrition, exercise, or supplementation as it relates to low carb SD, or as it relates to low carb MD or low carb USA. I want to talk a little bit about optimizing protein synthesis. Low carb, high fat nutrition has been proven to be both therapeutic and effective for metabolic health and fat loss. It's been less known to benefit increasing lean body mass. So when people come to me that want to put on weight that they've lost, either because they got their gallbladder out or they've been injured and for some reason they've either atrophied or they're experiencing sarcopenia, and I tell them that I want them to go on a low carb, high fat regime, they seem to pigeonhole that nutritional protocol for weight loss or for improving insulin sensitivity or for moving away from diabetes or treating diabetes or treating heart disease. They don't think of it as performance or for weight gain. So to kind of dispel that, in August, I gave a talk. I was lucky enough to be able to be in one of the breakout rooms at Low Carb USA San Diego in August, and we talked about low carb, high fat performance. And there's a ton of research out there, and there's a lot of conflicting research. A lot of fitness professionals, personal trainers, running coaches, wellness coaches, a lot of them out there are confused about the whole low carb lifestyle, and they'll give erroneous information based on skewed research. And if you want to, you can go to lowcarbusa.org, and hopefully you've been to the conference and you are a member. If you're not a member, you need to become a member so you can get access to this talk. It has a great question and answer period afterwards, and it kind of dispels the idea that low carb, high fat is just for medical use or therapeutic use. It's been very effectively used in both endurance athletes and strength athletes, and that's covered here. One guy that we always see every summer, and we see at most low carb events, is Dr. Ben Bukikio. And last virtual event, this is also, I think this one's on YouTube. It's on the Low Carb USA YouTube channel. We're actually streaming live there now. We're also streaming on Facebook. So if you know somebody that is going to benefit from this talk, please share and get them to listen. Well, he did a talk last month on the effects of diet and exercise on metabolic syndrome hormones. And what he really did that I thought was profound was he really did a great summary of how hormones are formed in the body, what their purpose is, and how they regulate certain metabolic function. So if you want Hormone 101, definitely review this from last month. Well, let's talk about protein synthesis. That's what I want to talk about for the next 10 minutes or so. And the basics are protein synthesis in your body in order to increase muscle, in order to recover from exercise, in order to grow and repair from either a hard workout or injury or even disease. You need recovery, and you need to optimize protein synthesis. And one of the main things that you have to do is eat protein so that it gets synthesized in your body. So if you're eating a low protein or a no protein diet, that's going to be a problem. The National Association of Sports Nutrition, of which I direct, has a course for metabolic health professionals. And for those interested in performance, the ideal recommended amount of protein intake is between 1.2 and 1.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And the NASN kind of simplifies that to about 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. Now, what does that mean? Pound of lean body mass is the part of your body that's not fat. So you'd have to get your body fat measured, find out how much of your weight is not fat, and then use that as a guideline for protein intake. Now that is still pretty high. For instance, if I'm 200 pounds and let's say I'm 10% body fat, that's 180 grams minimum, 180 grams minimum for performance a day. A lot of people aren't eating close to that. So what do we do if you can't eat that amount of protein? Well, we've got some other things to do. Well, maybe you need to eat proportionately. So around 20 to 25% of your diet should be protein. If you can't do that, there's still other things to do, but But if you can't go by the gram guideline, maybe you go by the percentage guideline. Maybe you go by the ratio guideline. That's about 1 gram per 1 gram of fat in your diet, right? Because even though fat's going to be 75% of your diet calorically, gram for gram, fat has twice the calories. So if you go 1 to 1, you're still getting about twice as much energy from fat than you are from protein, calorie value. The other thing you can do is resistance training. Resistance training is going to help you synthesize specifically muscle, right? And so what's the best form of resistance training you can do? Well, Dr. Ben's SMART training. So this is a summary of that. We've already talked about this in the past, but it's best for metabolic health and to increase lean body mass. If you're just starting out, if this is the on switch to fitness for you, then you should do whole body workouts. You should work your large muscle groups first. You should weight train or do some kind of resistance at a slow pace, not at a rapid pace, slow and steady. You can't go too slow to optimize Dr. Ben's SMART training. You want to go until you fasciculate the muscle, or to the point where the muscle can't contract at that weight anymore. So you want to go to failure. Concentric failure is good. We're not counting reps. It's time under tension. So you want to go slow for at least 30 seconds, but not more than 90 seconds. And you don't want to do that intense workout over and over again. You want to wait for those muscles to rest for a good 48 to 72 hours. And my courses for a metabolic health professional and these other meetings have gone into this further. This is just a summary of that. What I want to talk about now for just the remaining few minutes is, what if you're already weight training, or you're at your maximum of weight training, or you're injured, so you can't do certain resistance training, or you can't eat high amounts of protein? What then? Well, it all centers around spiking mTOR, which is a hormone we talked about last month, spiking mTOR secretion and spiking it post-workout. Now, you don't want to get your mTOR up and keep it up all the time. That's going to cause you the anabolic to the point of detriment. If you're just growing and growing and growing, someone who has a hormonal imbalance of growth hormone, they grow tall, their bones grow, their nose grows, their parts of their body grow too much, right? We want spikes, specific spikes of mTOR when the body's in a state of recovery, so that it can kind of replenish itself and then super compensate within a limit. If mTOR is not positively regulating cell growth, it can also negatively affect cell growth. If your body is in a perceived state of deprivation, so if you're on an all-fat diet with no protein and you're not working out, even if you're at a calorie deficit, your body might start to tap into lean body mass, and you might develop sarcopenia or atrophy or lose muscle mass if you don't pay attention to these other stimulants and try to maximize mTOR secretion. So some research has shown that not only from weight training and exercise can you kind of cause an mTOR spike, but you can actually extend that spike so that the body has a longer window of opportunity for growth and repair. And that's done through various studies. And these studies center around supplementation. Now, supplementation alone, it can be controversial. It's shrouded with hype and shrouded with marketing ploys. Here in America, you can put any supplement on the market as long as it's a food derivative. It's not regulated like a pharmaceutical in the United States. So there's a lot of stuff out there that might just be a placebo. But I tried to find credible research from specific peer-reviewed journals that validated this, and they are food derivatives. So I don't think that these are harmful. I think these recommendations are only going to be beneficial. And they talk about specific amino acids, creatine, which you may have heard of before, carnitine is another amino acid, and these are the specific studies. I'm just going to thumb through them. I love this one about ursolic acid, which is found concentrated in apple, in the skin of an apple, and it actually has been shown to increase skeletal muscle mass and brown fat. And so there's a benefit to taking these as supplements. So what's the summary of all this research? So I don't spend too much time. There's an amino acid that can help to be converted into arginine in the body, which is another amino acid which can instigate growth hormone and maximize growth hormone. That's something, as me, as a 52-year-old male, I think will be beneficial. And so I take about a tablespoon or about 2 grams of citrulline malate within this powder before a workout. I also make sure that I'm adequately salted in previous meals. I don't put salt in my coffee. Some of my clients do. And I make sure I have some natural source of caffeine before I do my workout. After my workout, now this is a bigger concoction. And these are things you can do while fasting, while intermittent fasting, or even while on a long-term fast, because they're not significant enough. They don't have a calorie value enough to cause a negative insulin response. I do L-carnitine. That's typically touted as something that's going to help fat burning, but in this case, it actually helps along in combination with L-leucine, which is a branched chain amino acid, to help instigate this lengthening of growth and repair, this increased opportunity for mTOR to stimulate the body to recover from your workout. Along in combination with creatine, you might have heard that of creatine before. Creatine monohydrate helps with anaerobic muscle contraction. It helps with adding weight, which is good, but it will also help, along with zinc taken together, it will help to extend this mTOR response, which is nice. D3, we should be taking D3 for a lot of reasons, I think. So that's in there. And then there's this ursolic acid. And here are the exact grams. You can have a copy of this slide presentation if you want. Another thing to optimize growth and repair and protein synthesis is not to limit cholesterol-based foods. So don't eat egg whites only. It's okay to have the yolk of the egg. It's okay to have some meat that has some marbling in it. Dietary cholesterol is not going to negatively affect your blood cholesterol. It's actually going to help this whole protein synthesis process. Eat a lot of omega-3 fatty acids like salmon and walnuts and avocados. And salt your food to taste. And I prefer Himalayan sea salt, and I actually use a potassium salt. And so these are some things that you can do if you're having trouble gaining or maintaining your muscle while on a ketogenic diet. I've got all the references here if you guys want to read the actual studies and look into this yourself. It's very interesting information. And you can always email me, jeff@trisystem.com, and I'm on YouTube as well. And then you can go to trisystem.com as my TriSystem Health Network website. All right. That's all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing. And hopefully the crowd is nice and warmed up for Andre. And Andre, if you have an opinion, even if it's an opposing opinion from what I just presented, feel free to critique me any way you'd like. I'm interested in your opinion if you have one. If not, let's just start your presentation.
Okay, wait a minute.
Hold on a sec now. Andre, hold on a sec. We're working on your audio.
Yeah. Are you muted? Try mute and unmute your computer.
Sorry, I was muted. Is that better?
Okay.
There you go.
Well, look, I am a very big believer in nutritional supplements. So I would fully endorse the fact that if we want true health, no one is eating perfectly. And we all know, and hopefully the listeners understand this, that optimum nutrition is essential for health, and the food guidelines and the recommended daily allowances for different minerals and all the different things we need for our body to be healthy were written on the stupid assumption that firstly everyone is already healthy and they're not stressed and they're sleeping enough and they're already not overweight, and the other assumption was that the food we're eating comes from nutrient dense, or not nutrient dense soil, but soil that has all of the different elements, selenium, molybdenum, boron, manganese, all those things in the soil. Yet, when we look at it, most people are eating food that comes from impoverished soil. Most people would be eating meat that is not grass-fed and is fed chemicals. So no matter how well we eat, we do need proper supplements. So I eat very well, like most of you on the panel would, I'm assuming. We grow our own vegetables. We don't use any chemicals. We eat only grass-fed meat. I'm not overweight. I've got a calcium score of 0, so I'm pretty healthy. But I take about 12 different supplements every day. So I take liver, I take lipoproic acid, I take magnesium with phosphorus because it's a cofactor. I take vitamin D. My vitamin D is right at the top of the range. Whole range of things. So I fully support, what you're saying. And I think from my perspective, the importance is making sure the supplements are the highest quality you can get. And I have a saying, you get what you pay for. So if you're buying supplements that are cheap, then my thing would be they're probably not the best, and you probably need to store them in a fridge or keep them in a very dark or safe place. So that's what I'd add. I don't know what you think about that, especially about the issue at the start about the food and how the recommended daily intake of those things was developed. But I think you'd agree with me on that, wouldn't you?
Yes, I'd agree 100%.
Right. Good. All right. Well, welcome and hello, everyone that's listening. It's a beautiful morning here in Melbourne, Australia. In the city I live, we have had no COVID cases for 14 days and no deaths for 14 days. So we are truly very lucky. And I'm thinking of everyone in the world that has COVID affecting their life. It's a terrible time, but we need to make the most of it. And that's why thinking about our health is really important at this time of our life in the world. So what I'd like to do is I just want to make sure, can you just give me a nod if you can see my screen in terms of me sharing my screen, because I have got some slides I'm going to use.
We can't see it now. You should have an option there to share.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Thank you. There we go. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to talk for probably only about 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer. And Doug, feel free to wind me up via the chat screen if I'm going too long. And then we can have some questions and talk through some of this. So this talk was given in a little bit of a different form in Cape Town in 2017 when I travelled there to speak on behalf or at an event for the amazing Professor Tim Noakes. And it was all about mindset and motivation to help practitioners understand how we can coach our clients to better health. So to those of you listening, whether you're trying to improve your health or you're a practitioner working in this field, you should get something out of this talk that will help you in your own journey or help your clients. So that's the essence of this talk. So let's get into it. And I love this quote here about, it's all about asking the right questions and looking at what the true reality of the situation we are in at the moment. And that's a big part of what I'm going to talk about today. All right, so let me just make sure I can work out how to move these slides forward. Just bear with me. And then we will be rocking and rolling 100%. All right. Sorry. Just bear with me here. Too many screens to move around. Oh my gosh. Here we go. All right, great. Okay, so you can all see that now. All right, so look, a little bit about my background first. I'm used to doing presentations in person with people and a clicker, not on a computer with 3 screens with things going everywhere. So this is me. So, you know, that picture of me up on the top right-hand side was when I was following what I called conventional, what I thought was conventional wisdom. But now I know it was actually conventional stupidity. So that was my first marathon. I was close to 80 kilos, so whatever that is in pounds. I was carrying water with me that was full of sugar, you know, Endura electrolytes that we apparently had to have. I had gels. And, you know, at the end of that run, I did it okay. It was like 3 hours 46 for a 48-year-old. I think I was. That wasn't too bad for an old little fat guy, although I didn't think I was fat. I thought I was just normal. At the end of that run, I was so sore and I couldn't walk for 3 days. Now, if we go forward to about 4 weeks ago, I did a 3 hour 27 marathon. And, you know, I look a bit different now. The photo there is when I did Boulder Half Ironman in 2017, I think. So I'm pretty much the same as that. I'm now 63 kilos. So, you know, 17 kilos difference from 2000 and when I was 48 and now I'm 55. But the difference is when I finished my marathon 4 weeks ago, I didn't even feel like I'd run a marathon. I was totally fine. I wasn't sore, had no soreness at all after that run. And that is all due to me understanding that I didn't actually see the reality of where I was. I was following conventional stupidity, not conventional wisdom. And the pain I was experiencing in my day-to-day life was enough pain to make me have a divorce from my carbaholic wife, which was pasta, bread, oats, and all of those foods that I was addicted to, like many of our clients are. And the key thing was the pain I was experiencing was enough to make me change. And sometimes you need to have a bit of pain before you can realize what you're doing is wrong. So I was essentially following the wrong advice. I was following all that advice from Professor Tim Noakes originally from, excuse me, his book, Law of Running. And I decided that that wasn't working for me after I went to a talk that Stephen Finney gave here in Australia. And that was just before Christmas one year. And essentially, I dropped all the carbs and totally changed my life due to that talk. And then obviously all of the other things that come out through, you know, Tim Noakes and other leaders in the field about me understanding what was going on with why I was overweight. So I've got a lived experience of following conventional stupidity, and now I follow not conventional wisdom. I follow what works for me because I've taken my glasses off and I can actually see the reality of the situation. And that's what I urge you to talk to your clients about or think about yourself is just because we're getting older and everyone else in our office is a little bit overweight or they're significantly overweight and sore and you don't have energy, you've really got to ask yourself, is this how we are meant to be? How is this going to be for me? What's this going to look like if I keep going down this path in 5 or 10 years? And is it really what I want? And that's what I did. So I got right into fitness. I started doing half Ironmans. I went to the World Championships in Chattanooga in 2017. I was ranked 10th in my age group in the world. I did a whole range of coaching programs. I left my corporate job, which was terrible. I got full certifications in professional coaching, and then in the health space, I did the Mark Sisson Primal coaching program. I did the low carb coaching program with the Real Meal Revolution, and obviously I also became a ambassador for the Noakes Foundation, where I help I've donated money to the foundation to help with their research, and I help share the work they do through the Nutrition Network as well. And I ended up being a full-time coach. So I now coach clients all around the world. It's all I do full-time. But it's a little bit different to some people, I guess, is that I won't actually coach people for athletic pursuits like marathon or triathlon if they're overweight, which is a bit strange. I actually say to people, if you're overweight, you need to lose the weight first. So that's sort of what I focus on first. So I have two streams of what I do. The coaching for people to help them lose weight and get healthy, so health coaching. And then I focus on people that are doing triathlon and marathons in terms of their endurance performance. And it works quite well. And I use a few different approaches in that space. In terms of the athletic performance, I combine a low-carb nutrition approach with Maffetone method training, which is low heart rate training. And when you combine those two things together, which is how I train, you can achieve outstanding results. So that's a little bit about my background. I was in the military for 20 years. If you want to know more, you can visit my website. There's a whole timeline there of my background and what I've done, etc. All right, so let's keep going forward. Now, this image here is something that maybe you as a practitioner has seen before, and maybe we could talk about this a bit. I was talking to a client or someone who wanted to be a client, and this guy was telling me he was pre-diabetic, he had kidney issues, he was not well, but it was like 10 out of 10 for him to try and change his health. And I said, great. Well, you obviously really want to make a difference with, with your health. And he said, okay, well, what are the things I'm going to have to do? So I explained to him the different things he'd have to do about, eating low carb. So, no bread, no pasta, no rice, get rid of processed foods, even eat less fruit. But you'd need to eat a lot more vegetables, because he'd sort of sent me a summary of what he'd been eating. And it was atrocious. It was basically meat and processed foods. And at the end of the conversation, I said, well, look, I'm going to tell you, what I think. And I did. I said, look, you're going to have to eat more vegetables and stop eating all of these other things. And he said, oh, look, I don't know about that. I'll have to come back to you. And the next day he came back to me and he basically said, look, I know working with you would change my life. I'd probably live longer. I've looked at all your testimonials, but he basically said, I can't eat meat. He said, I can't eat vegetables. I'm a carnivore. And that's the look I sort of had in my head when I hear that. And I hear this all the time, where people just say that, they're living in this world that they have a false sense of reality of what's really going on. So it's there for a bit of humor, I guess. So as doctors and or practitioners, I'm sure you've seen this before. I actually sometimes feel like this when I'm talking to doctors because I communicate with doctors when I'm working with clients that that are on statins or on blood pressure medication or on metformin. And they're saying to me, why would you put someone on a low carb diet and eat all that fat? It's going to be bad for their cholesterol. And I look like this sometimes myself, although most of the times it's on a phone call, so they can't see how crazy I think they are. But anyway, that's just something to think about. Right, let's look at these questions. So, when I do reviews with my clients, when we finish working together, I ask them to fill out a survey, and these are some of the questions that I ask during our coaching. And what I've asked them to do is sort of rate the impact that question has on their transformation. And a lot of these, as you'll see, are forward-looking questions, not backward-looking questions. They're not yes or no questions. So when you're sitting with a client, some of these are really powerful questions, and they can evoke a fair bit of emotion. So, where do you want to be when you're retired? Now, if you ask someone that who's aware of their health problems, they're 20 kilos overweight, they've got severe diabetes, they're on 3 or 4 medications, sometimes they can say, well, I don't think I'm going to get to retirement, or I have no vision of where I want to be. So as a coach, we need to help these people build a vision of where they want to be, because that's a long-term goal that might inspire them to make changes now, little small changes about their health. Asking them, how would you describe your health today, is an actual now question. So that's a really good question to ask. And even this one, what would you be willing to sacrifice to regain your health? I mean, that can be a very interesting question where people just go silent and they don't know what to say, right? And then lastly, what do you see in the future for you and your health? And that can be either way. That can be negative or positive, but that's one that a lot of people indicated was very, very important. So what I find is the first question and the last question are the two that most respondents said had a massive impact to their, thought process and the way they would make change happen. So what I'd like to do today is focus on a couple of these areas on this chart, and there are some tools that I will provide Doug or the team to share in a post. I think some of them might have been posted on a podcast I did with Doug the other week as well, but that's the Wheel of Life tool. So let's sort of focus first on this segment 1, which is the motivation for change. We'll talk about these key words: desire, ability, reasons, and need. And then we'll move right through to some examples with end clients about in this mindful section. And this will be quite interesting. I think this will be quite useful for people to look at examples. And I'm sure you have your own examples of a lot of these as well. Or if you're not a practitioner and you're just tuning into this to see what you can do for your health, maybe you could think that this is almost a one-on-one coaching session, but bear in mind, I'm not giving you any personal advice. This is all just experience of mine, and you can take away from it what you will. And once again, if you are on any medical medications or have any medical complications, please don't make any changes based on my advice. Please make your own decisions and work with your own medical practitioner around those areas, please. Okay. So how do we build motivation? Well, as a coach, we need to use verbs. Want, wish, like. How would you like things to be different? What would you like your life to be like in 5 years? And what do you wish you could feel like if you're at your best? So these are really good questions. You can come up with heaps of questions using those words. And one of the important things is when you ask the questions, pause and let the person think, because silence is golden. So just asking a question and pausing and letting the person you're working with sit with that thought, that can be really important. And just keep your mouth closed. Like coaches, some coaches love to hear our own voice because we think our job is to talk to people and teach people. The thing is, most people have the answers already. They just need to be able to access them. And that's why these powerful questions are important. Now, so we ask people, want, wish, and like. What are the things they'd like and want and wish for? Then we have to look at this ability thing. So what are you, what could be? So what can you do to move in that direction? Well, that's great. What could you start on this week? And imagine what you could be like. What could you start with? So you're giving them the power to explain what would be good for them. They have to come up with a plan. Sure, we as coaches can provide the technical insights and the technical information about what are good carbs, what are bad carbs, or even though, once we've worked with someone, they should be able to work that out themselves. But, we can provide the technical information, but we shouldn't be giving people a plan with exactly what they need to do first. So you've got to put that power in their hands to come up with their plan. This one here, reasons what will happen as a result of you making these changes. So as an example, you might work with a client and in their first couple of weeks, you're just simply trying to get them to get off processed food. Or in their food journal that they may have done at the start of the program, I do an observation week where they don't change their food. They write down whatever they're eating normally. They write down their bowel movements, their stress levels, their sleep, whatever exercise they're doing. And I ask them to connect between what they're doing, their behaviors, what they're eating, and how they're feeling. You may find that someone gets bloated a lot during the week. So if you know that the person's getting bloated and you know that it's from dairy, milk, or bread, or vegetables, some vegetables obviously can be allergens, you might want to sort of gently suggest, well, they may say, well, I could stop eating bread, I could stop having dairy. They could come up with a whole list of things themselves and say, well, let's just pick one. What do you think is the thing that's causing your bloating the most? And they may say, oh, it's definitely the bread. So, okay, so if you could stop eating bread for just a week, what would happen as a result? This gives them a reason. What would happen? Oh, well, I wouldn't be bloated. Okay, then you ask another question. How would that make you feel? Oh, I'd feel fantastic because I've been bloated for years. Great. Okay, so if you weren't bloated, what else? How else would you feel? Well, I'd probably have better bowel movements. I'd probably have more energy. I'd probably have a better day. I'd feel less grumpy. So these are all the things you want the client to build as reasons for what they want to do. And then lastly is how important, how urgent is this? What do they have to do next? What do they have to change in practical terms? So as an example, well, if I'm not going to eat bread, firstly, how important is this? Oh, it's really important. What? Tell me, if you've got 0 or 10, 10 being really important, 0 being not at all, tell me what number is it? If they say 3, you say, well, that's not very important. 3 is low. So what are you going to do about that? They may say, actually, no, it is like 9 or 10. Okay, if it's 9 or 10, when do you want to start making this change? I want to start tomorrow. Great. What do you have to do? Well, if I can't eat bread, I have to have an alternative. And this can start a really interesting question too, because that's where I often bring up this question about, well, okay, so what do you mean you have to have an alternative? And they said, well, for breakfast. And I say, stop right there. I said, there's no such thing as breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Because I find what happens in a practical sense is people struggle with breakfast when you're asking them to have steak and eggs because they're calling it breakfast. So I say there's no such thing as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This was made up by the food industry. We need to focus on saying it's first meal or second meal. So let's say you're not eating till 11 o'clock in the morning. That's closer to a lunch meal anyway, or a main meal. So why would you need bread? Oh, well, I don't. But they make this association that they get up, they have porridge, oats, cereal, bread, pancakes. I'm sure you all understand that. So just, take this away, that it's not about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or morning tea or afternoon tea or snacks. It's actually about just fueling the body with food. So what they're saying is they need an alternative to bread, but we've had this whole discussion around that breakfast can be any other type of meal. So we need to help them with suggestions. Well, you could have an omelette, you could have some leftover steak, you could have leftover meat, you could have boiled eggs, you could have a whole range of things. So we work through that circle of desire, ability, reasons, and need, and that drives motivation. So hopefully that has helped some of you think about some of those questioning techniques. All right, now tools. And as I said, we will go through some client sort of exact examples of clients and some discussions that we've had as well. Tools. So there's, we've got to think about self-reflection and how we feel, and then actually look at the reality, which are facts, And then, you know, we can sort of build goals based on the reality of the situation, but then we need to also do this ongoing reflection and analysis of how we feel and compare those things to results or so I call it, you know, subjective feelings and objective data, you know. So we have two types of things that we have to work on. So let's have a look at this wheel of life and see how this works first. Hey? Okay, so the wheel of life is a tool that we can use to reflect on our actual situation from our feeling point of view, and it enables the client to become more aware. It builds an understanding of a real situation, and you know, you can actually take this. This is the one we did for the Nutrition Network, and you can look at these segments and you can name them anything you wish. So you've got romance, family and friends, personal growth, fun, recreation, physical environment. You can change those segments to anything that you want to, right? And I'd be encouraging you that when you work with a client or yourself as a person doing this yourself, you get this tool and you complete it yourself. And sometimes it can be quite emotional as well when you actually sit there and think about, you know, what this can look like. So you get the tool and then you actually mark it up. And if you look at this tool, you can see, you know, to me, something stands out here. So if you look at this, this is not a wheel at all. You know, it's not a wheel. It's simply an unbalanced wheel. And you can see that, you know, this person has rated money as 2. They've rated romance as 8. Family and friends high, personal growth high, career and job is sort of quite low, health is medium. So if you look at this, you got to say, well, wow, I didn't think like this. Now, I had a client, a male client, who gave this to his wife to do. And I encourage, if you have a partner, that you actually get your partner to do one of these on you. So he gave his wife one of these to do, and she did it the way she thought about these segments. And I almost saved his marriage. He said, I got a phone call from him and he said, oh, mate, I did the wheel of life. It was great. And I gave it to my wife to do. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. And he goes, you've saved my marriage. And I'm like, why? And he says, well, I rated finances and money at 2 and romance as 8. And she did it totally the opposite way. So he said, I said, well, what did you do about that? And he said, well, we've booked a weekend away and we're going away to reconnect, because obviously there was some mismatch there, right? So, you know, when you look at this, there are some comments on the right, on the left-hand side here that you can use to sort of work with your clients. So, you know, you can look at, as an example, you know, an area that's number 4 rating. You know, what number would you like it to be? You know, ask yourself, what would you have to do to bring an area that was rated as 4 up to 7? And then you can use this to prioritize some goals and areas of work that you could do. Now, you can actually do this. You can actually do this with any sort of aspect that you like. But as an example, here's this area of health. So health was rated at 6, and we want it to get to 8. So the sort of like goal is bringing health from 6 up to 8, and also fun and recreation. We want to take it from, you know, 5 up to 7. So the next step in this process is saying, well, this is where I am now. This is where I want to be. And we only have to pick maybe 2 areas to work on. And we set some smart goals around this. And these are goals that have to be areas that the person can influence, and they have to be realistic in terms of being able to achieve. So, you know, this is part 2, that self-reflection. Now, the other part of this self-reflection is what I call mindfulness. And this is where, you know, the definition is sort of like the process of bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment. I like to say this is helping us actually ignore conventional stupidity, right? Because, as I say, I was 80 kilos when I was in a corporate office. Everyone else around me was a little bit overweight. I was always sore. I was always starving. If I didn't eat every 2 hours, I would almost have a fainting spell because I was so hungry from my blood sugar going so low. I just thought that was normal. I don't think I was really being very aware of the actual truth of the situation. So maybe let's talk a little bit here about some of these things you can see on this chart. Bowel movement. So I truly believe, and I hope no one's eating at the moment, but bowel movements are probably one of the most important indicators of health that we can really get connected with. Okay. So if we're not having a good bowel movement, we can really have some significant health problems. So one client I had was a woman who I was starting to coach, and she had told me that she wasn't going to the toilet for every 3 days. So she wouldn't have a bowel movement for 3 days. And she just thought that was normal. And worse, her doctor even said to her, well, that's in your genetics. Now, that's just crazy. So she changed her nutrition. She ended up taking some hydrochloric acid supplements to help with digestive process. And, within a little while, she was going to the toilet and she was losing weight. And that was, she realized then that she was, following some wrong advice. Energy levels. What are our energy levels like? So I asked people to think about, well, are they always hungry at 2 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning? And I asked them to think about, well, what did they eat 2 hours before that? And I explained that blood sugar roller coaster diagram of what happens and what happens with our adrenal glands firing up and all the messages that stream through our body when our blood sugar either gets too high or too low. And, ask them to do a self-experiment where they simply remove that sugar, remove those carbs for a day at the start of the program, start eating more fat, and connect with how their energy level changes. All of these things, our emotions, our hunger, our habits, our cravings, all connect with what's going on, in our typical day. So one of the other tools, or one of the other things I ask clients to talk to me about is what happens when they get hungry. So I know myself, if I'm sitting at my desk here, I'll walk downstairs with my New York Marathon mug, and I'll walk downstairs with my mug and I'll make a cup of tea. I won't even think about whether I want one. It's just an automated habit. Now, I have quite a few clients that when we start working together, snack in the evening, and they stand at the pantry and they eat, or they go to the pantry. So what I ask them to do is say, okay, let's say you feel like you're hungry. You go to the pantry. If you find yourself standing in front of the pantry, about to open the pantry, just pause, take a deep breath, and think, am I hungry? Or what did I have for my last meal and when did I have it? Was that enough? Or is this just a habit? And actually just take a deep breath through the nose, pause, hold the breath, blow it out. That'll calm our body down. It might make us think a bit clearer and actually go and have a bone broth instead, or don't have anything because it's just a habit. So these are different things to think about. The same with if you're at a social function and you're being, you're worried that people are going to judge you for not having alcohol. When someone comes up to you and hands you that glass of champagne or the beer, just pause, take a deep breath, and simply say, no, thanks, I'm good, I'm driving, or I'm drinking water tonight. And no one's going to judge you. And in fact, that's the next thing I'd like to sort of talk about, is this sort of social aspect, which I find is very prevalent with many clients, this social pressure to drink. I don't drink alcohol. I think it's poison. I've only got one liver, so I don't know why I do that. But other people can drink if they like. But, when someone's significantly overweight, or they have bloating, drinking beer, the gluten in beer, wine, alcohol isn't very helpful. So there's a whole range of things, and you can see these questions here on the left-hand side is often, I have Italian clients, men, who their mums make great pasta, and they're very stressed about going to their mother's on the weekend to have dinner because the mother always makes pasta. Well, very simply, you don't tell your mother or your mother-in-law you're trying to lose weight. You just say, look, I've been to the doctor, I've got an upset bowel, I can't eat gluten, therefore I can't eat your pasta. I still love you, mum or mother-in-law. I'm just going to have a steak and salad. Because I'm sure she's not going to say, oh, no, you have to eat my pasta if the doctor said you can't. If you say you're going to lose weight, she'll say, oh, you're beautiful, you don't need to lose weight, don't be silly. So it's about how we frame these things, because I'm sure, just as like mates going out, men going out, or women in groups going out to have coffee and cake, or men going out to have beers at a pub on a Friday night, our friends want us to be healthy. We shouldn't let this social pressure or this assumption that there's a social pressure for us to drink alcohol or eat pizza at a pizza bar stop us from moving forward with our health. So I would encourage people and coaches to have that discussion with your clients to say, look, if you're going out on a social occasion, have a discussion with your friends beforehand. You don't have to tell them you're on a diet, because you're not on a diet. You're on a life-changing coaching program. It's a health and wellness journey. It's not a diet. But you don't ever say to someone, oh, I'm trying to lose weight. If you're really overweight and you're changing how you're eating, they're going to probably know that anyway. I would be just saying, I'm changing the way I'm eating because I want to be healthier. Therefore, I'm not going to eat pizza and gluten, or I'm not going to have alcohol tonight. And I really encourage, I'd be really supportive if when we go out, you don't offer me alcohol, or you don't stir me up or cajole me to have alcohol or pizza, or ask me what's wrong with me. If you care for me as a friend, you'll accept my decision about what I'm going to eat and drink, and I'm not judging you if that's what you want to have. So these are all things we need to have those discussions with our clients. And that last point about tell me what this is about, because people will give you all these scenarios, and just asking them, well, tell me, is that really true? Do you really think that's the case? Have they told you that, this or that? Because often we build these things in our head and they're totally false. And sometimes they're justification for us to do what we actually know is not good for us, but we want to do because it tastes nice. All right. The next one, I'm too busy. This is a really big one as well. So, and social media, I got rid of Facebook 12 months ago, haven't been on it for 12 months ago. I've been so much more productive because I was wasting a lot of time on Facebook. The point there is that third point here, that typically I'll have a coaching call with someone, or I'll see their food journal that they've been tracking, and they've had a Subway sandwich one day for lunch, for first meal. And I'll say, oh, hey, how are you feeling? They say, oh, I'm bloated today. I'm like, oh, can you tell me why? And I know why, but I'm not going to say that, because you won't say, oh, I saw you had this, what's that about? Or why did you do that? You would never ask that. That's a judging question. They'd say, oh, well, I had a Subway for lunch. And I'm like, yeah, I saw that. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm bloated. Okay, tell me about that. And I say, well, I was really hungry, or I didn't have time this morning. I'm like, oh, okay, so would you mind telling me what time you got up? Oh, 6 a.m. And as you can see here, what variably happens is they have an hour and a half and they've wasted an hour being on social media, or they haven't got out of bed at 6 a.m. They've lied in bed on their phone doing emails, and they didn't bother doing anything about planning their meals. They didn't plan their meal the night before. They didn't prepare leftovers, or they didn't have the food in the cupboard or in the fridge. So they haven't shopped. So it's all about preparing and planning. And I like to say to people, you've got to first have the knowledge of what to eat And as a coach, that's our job to, and through your association with Low Carb USA, sorry, you will know what is good and bad food for your health, obviously. So you've got to have the knowledge of that, but then you have to have the ability to plan and execute on a daily basis what you're going to eat. And that is where a lot of people fall down. But it all comes down to planning, allocating time in your calendar for cooking, talking to your partner, mapping out the week of who's going to cook on what nights, what are you going to have, and who's going to do the shopping. These are areas that we can't forget about because they are so powerful in helping people change. And I see people get this wrong all the time. But once they really focus on it, they can be very, very successful. Very successful. Okay, we are coming to the back end of the talk now, just so you know. Now, here's this can relate back to that female client I had that was constipated all the time, and her doctor told her that it was just genetics that was the reason that she didn't go to the toilet, more than 2 or 3 times a week. So, and once again, this is what I thought about me when I was that 80 kilo, 48-year-old man. That's just me. I'm overweight and that's normal. It's total BS. It's not true. So here are some questions that you can ask clients that can be quite insightful, right? So, you've been constipated. What have you done differently with these last few days? And people will often say, oh, I don't know. And then once again, you just say, can you please have a real deep think about what's changed? And just let them sit with that in silence. The other thing you could do is say, well, okay, can you go back and review your food journal? Or you can look at your food tracking app and tell me, or can you get a notebook and pen out and write down what you think's changed? Or did you have any social functions? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. We were going to have steak and da-da-da on Sunday night, but our friends came over and they brought pizza and it was not gluten-free and I had pizza, right? So you really got to let people sit and think about these things. Tell me more about your bloating. What caused that? Obviously it's either going to be some rice, some bread, gluten, maybe vegetables that are causing an allergic reaction or dairy possibly. You've had a great energy all week. How does that make you feel? What can you do to get more? So these are more positive things, So what's changed? What has worked for them? Because we want our people we're working with to build their own ability to coach themselves, And someone that's doing some really good work, you might talk to them about, they're on the top of their game every day at work. How cool is that? What's that about? You want them to start saying, well, it's because I'm only eating twice a day. It's because I'm eating avocados and eggs and meat and I'm getting good sleep. And then to encourage them, you can, really get them up on a pedestal that there's only about 1% to 2% of people in the world that feel like we do when we've got optimized health. And that can be really powerful as well, because a lot of these people have come from a very bad situation, especially when they've lost 20 or 30 kilograms and their bloods have totally changed. So we've got to take them away from this thing of saying, well, that's just me and that's normal. And that all comes from this connection of how they're feeling, what they're changing, and what the change is. So, having clients journal can be very impactful as well. So I often encourage people to look at that aspect. Okay. Visualization, further future looking and positive thoughts. So these are also things that we can use in our coaching that can be quite successful. And these are some of those questions that I use at the start of our coaching program. So asking people for the reality, this comes back to that reality of the situation, and then being able to build a picture or so some people do a vision board. Some people meditate and sort of build a picture in their head. So what does that look like? How will your days be when you're there? What impact will you have on others? So, if you're working with someone that has grandkids or their own children who are possibly going to have grandkids or, possibly going to have kids. So typically, if I'm working with someone in their 50s or who's 55 or whatever, and they've got kids that are in their late 20s or 30s, and they're not paying attention to their health, I will ask them some of these questions. What example do you want to set for your kids? What example do you want to set for your grandkids? Do you want to be able to be at the soccer field or at the football field or the basketball court with your kids? What do you want to be, what do you want to be doing with them? Wouldn't it be great to be running around the field with them, chasing them? And, some people can once again have quite an emotional reaction to that because they know the fact that they're 30 kilos overweight and they're on 3 medications, that isn't going to happen. So, these are positive things that we can try and move people forward to by asking them these questions and to build their own picture of where they could be and what they could have in their future for themselves and their family. This is nothing about food. This is about this when they get stuck and they're at a function or they're away for a weekend and there's only crap food available. You want to teach them how to hook into these things before they go and eat those donuts or the pizza or have the 10 beers, because these are the thoughts that lock in their head that can help them not have that, because they know that's going to take them backwards significantly. So always reframe, forgetting about what's happened in the past, because we can learn from the past, but staying there won't help us. We have to focus on where are we going in the future, and that can be very, very powerful indeed. Now, to provoke action, and we're coming to the end right now, okay? We can have a couple of ways to put this forward to people. We can use option one, which is the one I prefer to use as much as possible. And this is around this positive vision, positive impact, positive situation. And this has the ability to help people come up with their own story. So we ask people to come up with their own story about how are they going to look in 10 years or 5 years or whatever time frame it is for them. But if we have a really good relationship with someone that we've been coaching for a while and we have a really good connection with them, we use option two. And I've just done this. In fact, the last story I'll tell is I'm a graduate from Duntroon Royal Military College. So that's like West Point in America, as an example. I went to I think 10 years ago, we had a class reunion, and I wasn't coaching then. I was just a corporate guy, right? And this guy rocked up to the function, and I said, "Oh man, gee," I basically called him so-and-so for being so fat. And it was like we were good friends, so it wasn't in a horrible way. And once again, I wasn't a coach at that time. It just sort of came out, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I am. But that's life." Well, he came to me just 12 weeks ago and he said, me saying that to him had stuck with him for 10 years, but he just didn't know what to do. And we've just finished our first 3 months of working together. He's lost 14 kilos, totally changed his life. And he's going to keep working with me now for another 12 weeks. But that was suitable to him because we were friends. We'd known each other for a long time. You wouldn't do that to someone necessarily who you just started coaching with. But yeah, so we always want to try and use option one as the preferred option of positivity in our coaching. All right. So lastly, before I finish off, bit of self promotion here, but something that will help you as well. Please feel free to download my health and wellness app. You can just search my name, Andre Obretovic, on the App Store and download the app. It is totally free. There is no ads on it. There is no spam on it. There is a course I've written on there, which is a course that you get access to forever, which is covering nutrition, sleep, stress management, exercise, covers a whole lot of information about math training and low carb, and it's $200 a year or $200 forever. If anyone wants a one-on-one coaching session, you can message me. They are $99 for 45 minutes, and you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I would love to hear any questions anyone has, and I will now wait to see how we go. Thanks, guys. Hope it's been positive and beneficial to you, whether you're a coach or whether you're an individual trying to change your own life.
That was awesome. Thank you very much. We are streaming out on YouTube and Facebook, and I think Pam and Jeff may be trolling on that to see if there's anything in there. But we do give preference to the people on the chat on our web page. So Mariana's there, and Ali Honey Jarvis, and all of those folks. Anybody who wants to ask a question, just type it in, and one of us will find it and ask the questions. They don't have to be some. I mean, Andre is very, very well versed in the whole low carbohydrate conversation. So it can be about what he talked about here, or it can be just a general question. He talked a lot about his personal story and all of that. So, you know, if you have anything that you want to ask of any of our panel here, go for it.
Andre, do you have a lot of international clients?
Yeah, I do. Mainly in the US, in Colorado, Denver, Seattle, Canada, and then in London.
That's great. So you're just up all the time, 24 hours.
No, I'm not. I enjoy I get 8 hours sleep every night. So I'm in bed at 9:30 p.m. I'm usually up by about 6 a.m. So no, I either do early morning or, I basically do early morning, and 7 p.m. is sort of latest I'll work to.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's nothing else coming right now. So I have a question that you've mentioned a couple of times when you did the podcast, and you've talked about it here now, and that's about the math training thing. So, you know, I studied a lot about Phil Maffetone and his concepts and everything. Maybe go into how does it work for you? Because I'm thinking if I do what's it, 180 minus your age, right? That's the concept, that you want to train at a heart rate that's 180 less your age. And for me, that is down at like 120, and it's like I'm a pretty fit guy, right? But if I just walk around the house, my heart rate goes above 120. So how can I even start running if I want to keep my heart rate down that low? Maybe. Well,
Doug. So when I did my marathon the other week, I ran 4:55 pace. It was a bit slow, and my average heart rate was 126. So you might be very fit, but you're not.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm asking you. Is what how long does it take you to get there, and what did you do in the beginning? Because I would literally just have to walk, in the beginning in order to keep it down there.
Yeah.
So is that what you do?
Well, no. What you could do is you could row, indoor rowing or indoor cycling, because you would get more. You get more exercise in without having to stop as much, because obviously running has a lot more impact, and you build your aerobic capacity more over a longer time by rowing or indoor cycling without doing crazy shit that a lot of classes have you do. So that would be one thing. The other thing would be walking hills with a pack on. And there are hills in San Diego, so I would actually go
right here, yeah.
I would go walking. And if you need to raise your heart rate to that, and you want to be in a 10-beat zone, right? So math, I've just finished their formal certification training last week. There's a 10-beat zone. So if you're 180 minus your age, let's say, like I'm 55, right? So mine's 125. So if I take away any other adding on or minusing off for health or results that I've got, if my standard MEF rate's 125 maximum, you have a range of 10 beats. So you want to work between 115 and 125. That's your zone. And you want to work as much as possible in the middle of that. So 120, right? 120 is where you want to be mostly. You would find other activities that get your heart rate to 120, and it would take, 3 months before you see any progress. And you do a MAF test, which is that 5 kilometer test, or there's a rowing test, or there's a cycling test, and you track the data and you graph it and you look at your progress where you're putting out more power, more speed for the same heart rate. But it takes patience.
Yeah. The other thing that I've always thought about that is, I mean, he takes 180 less your age. Now that's like, there's a lot of range of capabilities and body types and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Does it not make more sense to basically work out what your maximum heart rate is, and then it would be maximum heart rate less a certain amount, as opposed to a fixed 180? I mean, how can it be sure that what applies to you applies to me in the same way, that it's exactly 180 less my age?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Well, I used to train on the whole max heart rate method, and all I got was inflammation and soreness and sickness. But to test your max heart rate, you have to actually do a proper test on a treadmill. It's very expensive. Most people stop before they get to their maximum heart rate, and most general population wouldn't actually know how hard they can push themselves. So it's flawed information. But what Phil's done is 180 is the base, but there's a whole methodology that you can either stay at 180 minus your age, or you -5 or -10 or +5 or +10 based on a whole list of criteria. So if you've got asthma, you -5. If you've had a major illness, if you've had asthma, you -5. If you get more than 2 or 3 bad colds a year, you -5. Not 5 and 5, but 5. So yours would be 120. If you've had major illness, hospitalization, major surgery, you're -10. If you have consistent results, no illness, no body weight issues, you're lean, you plus beats to it.
Okay.
So there is that personalization as a process that lists all those categories that you need to think about. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I got a question here from Pam, which I'm actually interested in hearing about as well, because you talked about the person with bloating and what's it?
Constipation?
Yeah.
No.
So using the hydrochloric acid for constipation. That's it.
Helping it.
Yeah. So I have a vested interest in the answer to this as well. So maybe just constipation in general, if you could elaborate a bit more on how people can fix that and what effect the hydrochloric acid has. And Pam's asking, is there a particular brand or anything that you maybe recommend?
Sure. Okay. Well, remember, I'm not a doctor, and there's doctors here that will probably have their own opinion about this, which will be much more educated than mine. But from my experience, constipation, especially, and once again, I'm not being, I'm just going to say it, for women can be a much bigger problem than men in my experience. And that can be related to a couple of things. And I'd be keen to hear from the doctors on the panel or what you think as well, is that there's a syndrome called something bowel syndrome. Oh, sorry.
Irritable?
I've just got a mental blank. No. It's about traveler's colon. That's what it's called. So some women don't like to go to the toilet unless they're in their own toilet at home. And I'm sure some men are the same. But this can happen where people don't get enough time to actually just sit and go to the toilet. So typically, and once again, I'm not being sexist, but women at home, maybe looking after kids banging on the toilet door, mum, 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 you know, going crazy in the house. You can't even sit and go to the toilet. And over years and years and years, this builds into some sort of issue where people need to sit and actually just have quiet time to go to the toilet, and that doesn't happen. So that can lead to this issue. That's one thing. So first thing I ask people is, do you actually rush in the morning? And invariably they'll say, oh, I sat and tried, but I couldn't wait, I had to go to work. So they don't move their bowels first thing, and then they go to work and they don't have time, or they don't feel like they need to. So that's one of the things I ask people to think about. The other thing is, and that's about stress. So that can be stress related. If we have high cortisol, if we're in a stress situation, our body doesn't really care about making babies, digesting food, excreting. All it's worried about is getting us in a state where we can survive the fight or run. So our body starts to close down some of these important processes as well. So we end up not moving our bowels, because if we're going to be running away from the saber-toothed tiger, why do we need to go to the toilet, right? So they're two things to think about. In terms of other things, hydration, we need to be properly hydrated. So if we're not drinking enough water, I notice this myself, if I don't drink enough, I find my bowel movements change. And if we're not eating enough, in some instances, if we're not, and we're not allergic to them, if we're not eating enough greens like spinach, green vegetables, that can cause a problem as well. Now, so when you combine stress and maybe not enough water and not having time to go to the toilet, it all leads to this big cascade of being constipated. And hydrochloric acid is something that our body produces to help with our digestive function and breaking down our food. And when we're stressed, our body doesn't bother producing that or making that available, because our body isn't worried about digesting food. So it's all this chain of issues that cause problems. Now, I don't know what type of hydrochloric acid supplement you can get in America. We use practitioner-based ones only from a company called Biotics and a company called Apex Energetics. You have to be a practitioner to source them, but I'm sure people in America can buy them on Amazon or whatever, but that's what we use. And it seems to work. But, you know, often it's about just having enough time to sit and go, being relaxed. You know, they're my thoughts anyway. I'm not sure what Brian or Kristen have to say on those
I'd love to hear what they're going to say.
What do you, yeah, guys, you guys have an opinion? Dr. Brian or Dr. Kristen?
Yeah, I think Kristen's muted.
Kristen's muted. So you talk first, Brian, while Kristen unmutes herself.
You know, usually what I do is I've had some good success with magnesium supplement. And obviously exercise activity. Some people, coffee works for them. Other people, you know, watching the stress. Hydrochloric acid, I haven't looked at yet, but I'm very intrigued by that. And I know there's different types of magnesium. And usually what happens, people are stressed and they start taking magnesium and they get the runs from taking too much. But I've seen that with magnesium deficiency. Yeah. So, Kristen, did you have something to say?
She's still muted. Try mute and unmute. Muted.
Yeah. Try to toggle it. Toggle your mute and unmute.
Yeah, toggle it. Oh, shame. And you were fine when you were in the last time. It's like Brian in the event.
I agree, Brian. Magnesium's very, very helpful as well. Like, I take 400 milligrams a day and my levels are just in range anyway. So magnesium can be great. The other thing is vitamin C. There's a zinc and magnesium powder you can get as well. I find if you have too much vitamin C, you can start to have runny bowels, which is not good either. But yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
We've got a question from Ali. Go ahead. What'd you say, Brian?
Well, I was going to ask Andre, you know, one of the things we see is we do medical weight loss, metabolic health stuff. And what I've noticed is the women, especially who are really concerned with the scale, they have the slowest weight loss of anyone in the world. Do you have any input on that, or what do you recommend for people who are really hyper vigilant about that?
Oh, God. I ask them to only weigh once a week, just once a week, and make them understand that weight loss could be the difference between not having a bowel movement and just having too much water or not enough water during the day. So I urge them only to weigh once a week. But I also ask them to look in the mirror and feel their body, because it may not have a change on the scale. So, you know, I ask them to have in fact, that's a really good question, Brian. I ask people to have 3 or 4 goals for the week. One is the weight. One is their sleep improving? One is their energy improving? Is their skin improving? Because obviously when you take all that crap food out, your skin obviously improves. So I ask them to take a photo of their face. So I say, look, you know, each week have 3 or 4 goals. Some weeks you're not going to lose weight on the scale, but your body shape may change. So I ask them to have their favorite pair of undies or a dress that they put on the other days and just say, hey, is it? And they'll say, oh, well, it's weird. The scale doesn't show it, but my dress feels lighter, looser. And I'm like, fantastic. That's great. So take them away from the thing about scales every day and move them into, well, look, if sleep's improved, doesn't that make you feel great? And you sort of take their mind off that aspect, you know?
Yeah, great.
Ali has a
Kristen,
question.
can you?
If you're on a limited budget and you're interested in allotting a small amount of money to supplements, what would be the most important supplement you would suggest if they could only get 1 or 2 because of their budget?
Vitamin D, in my opinion.
That's very interesting.
D3?
I agree. D3, yep, agree.
My levels were down at 100, and I don't know if this is the same in America, but in Australia, our range is supposed to be 50 to 250 millimole or whatever the number is. Mine was 101, and the doctor was like, oh, that's fantastic. And I'm like, no, it's not. I want to be 250. So I started taking 20,000 IUs a day for about a year, and it went up to 170, and now it's 260, and now I'm just taking 5,000 once a week. And yeah, vitamin D, absolutely. Vitamin D, and then probably zinc, I reckon.
Yes.
Because of COVID.
Yes.
Vitamin D, zinc. If you exercise a lot, magnesium. Yeah, they're probably the top 3, I think. You agree, Brian?
Absolutely, 100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I take beef liver. Prostate, testicles, bone marrow, lipoproic acid. I take amino acids, adaptocrine from Apex, which are all herbal stuff for sleep, phosphatidyl serine for helping with sleep, lipoproic acid, you know, heaps of cod liver oil. Cod liver oil is another good supplement as well. But remember, you get what you pay for. So if you're taking vitamin D, I'd go for a liquid, and it needs to be kept in a fridge. Yeah, don't buy something cheap, because it's probably not going to be that effective. Brian, what would you suggest about that?
Yeah, I agree, and also, you know, just getting out in the sun for 10 or 15 minutes, you can get a lot of international units just from sun exposure for sure. And then obviously watching the carbohydrates, sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not vitamin
back deck? Well, hang on, we've got a back deck, and I'll take my top off and go and lie in my underwear on our back deck for 20 minutes in the middle of the day, just when the sun's out. It's fantastic. Sorry, Jeff.
What, vitamin C as a supplement? Yes or no?
Brian?
Yeah, I have no problem with taking vitamin C, especially if you're a carnivore. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. You know, I don't see any problem with it.
So someone
Very
quickly
good.
asked, what is the phospho that you talked about for sleep? What did you talk of? Something?
Phosphatidyl serine. It's a practitioner-based supplement that, if they look up, if I type in the name of it, Doug, can you share it with people?
Yeah, sure.
Let me
In
find
our
it.
chat,
Keep
in
going.
our special private chat box here.
Because I can't spell it. That's all.
And I also like a
Phosphate-
supplement called L-theanine that's helped a lot of
Thionine.
people.
And phosphatidylserine he's talking about. Phosphatidylserine.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
It's a derivative of lecithin, I think, right?
Yeah, it's got lecithin in it. I'll get the name of it and I'll share it in the
And
chat.
just copy it in here, and I'll copy it to our chat.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so someone was, this came up again at the, someone here says they have a client who's still struggling with high blood pressures. They've been keto carnivore for 6 months and making good progress in all other areas. I don't know. I was reading the other day that some people that help, reducing carbs and all of that helps with blood pressure in almost all cases, but there are a few people who just genetically have higher blood pressure. So I don't know. Brian, have you got
I would check
thought
a
on that?
fasting insulin level. I would check a fasting insulin and see what it looks like, because a lot of times people can be stressed, tense. I mean, it's just not
Yeah.
diet, folks. If you're
Yeah,
worried and
totally.
don't sleep and all that, it can make a difference. I've seen people, it takes a little while, then boom, they're off their meds. And fasting's another thing that's very helpful. I've seen people fast and their blood pressure normalizes. And I think, again, Jason Fung has data on this being, insulin related a lot of times.
Cool.
But I do agree, there's some people with high blood pressure.
Yeah, they're not a lot, but it does exist. There are these outliers that we have to remember that they do exist. Kristen, it looks like your audio might be working. So,
Are
do you
you
want
able
to
to join
weigh in
in?
on any of these things?
Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Had to reboot the computer. I don't even know where to start. I was going to go back to the constipation question. I completely agree with what Andre and Brian were saying. Magnesium citrate specifically tends to get the GI tract moving, but I think it's also important too to kind of look for the root cause. Maybe it is an electrolyte deficiency. As they were kind of talking about, if you're in this constant flight or flight, high stress mode all the time, that's chronic stress, you're going to have issues. And it can go either way. Sometimes it leads to hyperactivity, and sometimes things just slow down completely. Going back to the hydrochloric acid, that is something that's gaining a lot of traction right now in other digestive enzymes and pepsin and things. And there's a big kind of issue with hypochlorhydria, which is decreased stomach acid. And people have been, popping all these over-the-counter antacids for so long, your Protonix, your Nexium, your Pepsid, all of those. And they're actually finding reflux is from too little acid in the stomach. Sounds counterproductive, but that's kind of a newer treatment right now that they're using hydrochloric acid to treat acid reflux and heartburn and constipation and other digestive things. And the other component I would mention is food sensitivities. If you're constantly eating foods that you are sensitive to that are causing bloating and other types of discomfort after eating, sometimes just eliminating those foods can help regulate bowel movements again too.
Okay.
Dr. Kristen, what about your supplement cabinet, or just your preference? If you had only one or two supplements to take, would you even add supplementation?
Yeah, I actually do like supplements. I always like to try to emphasize that supplements are like an added bonus. If you have a healthy, well-balanced, I don't want to say well-balanced, a whole foods-based diet, you should be getting most of your nutrients from your diet without need of supplementation. But if you want to supplement, there's definite benefits to that. Personally, I historically have had low vitamin D levels back when I lived in the Midwest. So I would supplement with the vitamin D, K2. Magnesium I take every day as well. I have kind of played around with glutathione, which is your body's endogenous antioxidant. And to be honest, I didn't find a whole lot of a difference with it. when my diet is primarily carnivore, I do take a vitamin C supplement as well. I also am a big fan of collagen protein for skin, hair, joint health. It's also supposed to help repair leaky gut for those with sensitivities in the stomach and autoimmune disease. So those are kind of my go-to supplements, but I can't say I'm religious about taking all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. So, have you got something, Jeff?
Yeah, we've got a question out there about men on a ketogenic diet having to urinate more frequently to the point where they have to wake up at night and urinate more often. Can anyone answer that question?
Well, I think we do see that often at the onset of a low carb or ketogenic diet is your insulin's decreasing. You tend to diurese more. Insulin does act on the kidneys and it causes reabsorption of sodium and water. So there is like this diuretic phase, and it can be the first few weeks, and it depends how high your initial insulin levels are at the start. The other thing is your body uses your kidneys and urine to make sure your electrolytes are balanced. So if you chronically have low sodium levels or low potassium levels, your body's going to try to diurese extra water to make sure the blood levels of these electrolytes are in balance. So I'd say sometimes it's you could be peeing a lot more just from too much water without electrolytes too. So you want to make sure you get your electrolytes in.
Okay. So you mentioned that you're predominantly carnivore, and that leads me to a question I had for Andre. I really had to laugh when I was listening to your talk. You kind of mentioned it here as well, but the one that you did for the Noakes Foundation, where you were talking to that guy and you were telling him what he's going to need to do, and you said one of the things is you're going to need to eat a lot more vegetables, and he said, "Nah, mate, can't do that. I'm a carnivore." And but you said you were looking at his food logs and that, and he was eating a bunch of other crap apart from the meat, all this processed stuff. But so how that translates to being a carnivore is beyond me. But I am interested in the fact that, especially now, since this whole carnivore thing has picked up a lot of momentum, and there's so many more people actually dabbling in it at the very least. But you're very strong on vegetables, so maybe if you could give us a reason, a justification for how you think about the carnivore diet and how important vegetables are.
Oh, yeah, look, I just personally love eating vegetables, and I don't have any leaky gut issues or known allergic reactions to any vegetables. And because we grow our own as well, I know the soil I come from, so it's very rich soil. I guess for people, some people I work with that have rheumatoid arthritis or really bad inflammation, they have some sort of allergic reaction, and my wife can test people to these allergens. She's a nutritional therapy practitioner, so she has test kits and can test, if people are allergic to eggs or broccoli or, anything, casein, etc. If someone doesn't have those allergens or reactions, and they, and also if they've got arthritis or significant inflammation, I do recommend they eat a lot more meat, eggs, and remove some of the possible offending vegetables, especially if they get bloating. But if someone doesn't have those issues and they can tolerate vegetables cooked in the right way, and we try and explain to them, how broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables can cause problems to them. Yeah, and we try and explain what to look for, then they don't, and if they don't have any of those issues, then in my opinion, they should eat vegetables. but this guy, he was actually eating a whole lot of processed crap and calling himself a carnivore, which is totally wrong, you know.
Exactly.
So one of my best mates, who I coached for a while, who now is one of my best mates, he did carnivore very well for 6 months. He did it effectively. He did it following a very good approach, including eating offal. But after 6 months, he decided to start, eating vegetables again, small amounts, because he was just sick of eating meat all the time. So I have no issue with people doing carnivore. I think it's great. I personally couldn't live like that, but once again, I don't have any reactions to these offending vegetables that I know of. And as I said, the things we grow ourselves, so I know where they come from and what they're grown in. So I like to eat those types of things myself. But I do have a reaction to kale, so I don't eat kale, but not to broccoli. I don't know what that's about, but I don't eat kale.
Huh. Okay, interesting. So
I already Lee has a question.
Say that again, Jeff.
Ira Lee, who's coaching a client. She's a male client on keto for about 6 months, and he's a ketovore, so he's ketogenic carnivore. But his blood pressure is high, 150 over 90.
You might have missed that. We touched on that already.
We already touched on how to reduce his blood pressure.
No, well, you're referring to the question that's in the chat box, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked Brian about that already.
Can I actually comment on something about the high blood pressure, if that's all right?
Cool.
My wife had high blood pressure, and during her training, we found that she was allergic to casein, because casein was causing her arteries to inflame. So once again, I'm not a doctor, but I would highly recommend anyone that's following low carb, that has high blood pressure, low carb or keto, and has high blood pressure, and they are having dairy, they could look at doing a test on themselves to remove casein. But the other thing is, you can do this thing, and I'm sure Kristen and Brian would know what this is, maybe Jeff as well. It's called the cocoa pulse test, where you take your pulse, you then eat dairy, and you can do this with any type of food that you think you have an allergic reaction to, but with casein for blood pressure, it's a key thing. You could have milk or some sort of dairy product that's full of casein, and take your pulse straight after, and if your pulse has changed by about 10 beats, that's your body saying, I'm allergic to this. You can look it up. It's called the cocoa pulse test. I'm sure there's a much more scientific explanation to it.
It could be a histamine release.
Yeah, it's a histamine release. And once again, I'm not trained in this. I just listen to my wife talking about this. And the other thing is, if you have an old-fashioned blood pressure machine, where you pump the thing, to test for adrenal gland response to specific imbalances in electrolytes and other foods, you can also do the same thing, where you can be sitting down, take your blood pressure, and then you release something and stand up, and if there's a massive change in your blood pressure, then that's also some indication that there's some I think it's adrenal insufficiency. Your adrenals can't produce one of the chemicals they produce. You may know about it more than me. So that's an indication that your adrenal glands are dysfunctional, which is another major health problem from stress. There's all these little weird, witchy wizardry things that doctors may not necessarily go into, but the cocoa pulse test is a really good one to check for allergic reactions to foods as well. I know that's on a bit of a tangent, but it's really helpful.
Very interesting, yeah.
Well, I think with that too, we do an elimination diet. A lot of people go carnivore, and then they just add different vegetables back in to see how they respond if they start getting gut problems or fatigue or all those kind of things. It's helpful.
Anything else?
Well, if you guys don't have a question, I have a question for the two athlete guys over here, Andre and Jeff. What's your opinion on this heart rate variability? Looking at that as a function of health, have either of you looked into that? Because I know you're both athletes. It's something I haven't looked into a lot, but I've heard a lot of talk about it with regard to general health, and it's something I want to look into, but I don't know if you have any expertise in that area.
Do you want to go first, Jeff?
Clarify heart rate variability. What do you mean? Like heart rate reserve?
People are looking at they're having an aura ring and different things, and they're actually monitoring the heart rate variability during the day as a marker of health. For instance, athletes, they say, depending on the heart rate variability, they can predict who's going to win a marathon and who's not, basically on what their heart rate variability is during training or during normal activities. So I haven't looked into that much, but it's something I'm going to delve into. But I was just curious from a training standpoint or a general health standpoint, if you have any opinion on that.
There was a guy.
So you go first, Andrew, or you want me to take
it? And then I'll share. No, you guys go and then I'll share.
All right. So basically, a lot of cardiologists have said we all have the same amount of heartbeats in our lives, right? So why would an athlete make it go faster, and why would being athletic lengthen your life? Well, because exercise lowers your heart rate over time. That's a good thing. But this heart rate variability kind of talks about recovery from different changes. So if you're seated for a certain amount of time and then you stand up and then you sit back down, how soon does your heart rate go back to what it was before you stood up? So I think that, in my opinion, not based on what I've read, but just based on my gut opinion, that athlete is going to respond better, who recovers better and adapts better in a shorter period of time, rather than this gradual fluctuation. If his heart adapts immediately and sooner, it's like two people run up the stairs. I'm gonna race Brian up 3 flights of stairs. Whoever gets there first is the winner. That means whoever gets there first is the fastest. But if I'm bent over and out of breath, and even though I might have beaten Brian, but Brian's not out of breath, and he says the best 2 out of 3, he's obviously more fit than me. Now, that doesn't mean that that the fittest person always wins the race. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things to add to that too, because heart rate variability is a very good index for recovery, and it's actually the amount of time in between heartbeats and how that varies. And usually the lower it is, it's a sign of some type of stress in the body, right? Like if your heart rate variability is around 20 or 30, it's overtraining, it's chronic stress from your daily life. You ideally want a higher heart rate variability. And it's supposed to be a marker of stress, and with that, inflammation typically. So the Oura Ring is a good tool to track it, but there's other devices that are coming out now as well. And it can vary from day to day, person to person. Like if you're at 20 or 30 for a couple nights, that might mean you've been overtraining, you had some really high intensity workouts, a day of rest, and you might be right back up there again at like 70, 80.
Yeah. So I would say there's a couple of things. Resting heart rate is a very good indicator of health and recovery and resilience. So there's 2 things I look at. Resting heart rate, which is totally different to HRV. So I use a device called a BioStrap. It's a medical grade sensor, tracks my oxygen saturation, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, sleep, and that shows me my trend of my resting heart rate. So I use that as an indicator of how much have I recovered or am I stressed. But heart rate variability, as Kristen says, is exactly what she said. It's the difference in the beats. However, there is a problem, and I've posted an article there in the chat, Doug, you may want to share, is when you have a very low resting heart rate variability is not actually an accurate measure of recovery, because our body goes into a state of what they call parasympathetic saturation. So if your resting heart rate is under 40, like mine, and a lot of this is where elite athletes maybe can come unstuck if they're not got a good practitioner working with them. If you take your heart rate variability overnight, which is called nocturnal HRV while you're sleeping, lying down, combine that with a low resting heart rate, your heart rate variability will show that you haven't recovered and it's very low. So my HRV at night, and I can show the data, is generally 30. And that would indicate that I'm not ready for training. But what that's an indication is that my body is in this state called parasympathetic saturation, thinking that I'm so stressed that the heart has to beat at a constant beat because my heart rate is so low, right? So there are things, and in this article I've posted here, it explains that in a lot more detail, not just from me, but from a guy called Andrew Felt, who's an expert in, in heart rate variability. So there are things we need to look at as individuals about what is our resting heart rate, how does that impact our HRV, are we doing our HRV lying down? I need to take my heart rate variability sitting or standing, because then my body has a little bit of a higher resting heart rate, not much, and then do it consistently in that manner every day. So my average HRV is 42, which means I wouldn't be recovered, but trust me, I'm very recovered, but it's because I have that low resting heart rate. So yeah, HRV can be a very effective indicator, but then there's that individual aspect you need to look into as well.
Just quickly, I've learned something new about the system, and that is that when you put it in our little private chat, I can't copy those URLs that you put in. So
okay, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Just if you could send an email or something like that, then I can copy and paste it into the chat.
Worries.
Cool. The chat will still be going even after we shut this down. Anybody? Any other questions there, Jeff? Oh wait, June. So
somebody had a general question about aging and different needs.
I was asking to you if she could be a little bit more specific. She says, can you speak to aging and different needs? But that's like kind of an open-ended.
Very general.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that's a bit difficult to respond to, I think.
Sleep more. Sleep more. Do less intense exercise. Do more aerobic exercise. Eat less often. Intermittent fasting. Reduce stress, and look up Dr. David Sinclair and Dr. Rhonda Patrick.
Oh, okay.
And look at resveratrol and nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN and resveratrol. But look up David Sinclair and Rhonda Patrick.
Okay, there we go, June. And there was a question just saying something about supplementing K2. Was mentioned briefly. Somebody wanted a bit more info on that.
Brian, you can probably add more than me, but I take I take K2 every night in sublingual drops as well.
Yeah, I take K2 and D3. You know, there's some evidence with regression of coronary plaques with K2, so I think it's definitely reasonable. I take K2, D3 also.
Okay. Anything else? I think if we don't have any other questions, I think we can thank you very much for taking the time on your Sunday morning there down in Melbourne and joining us. If you're keen, I'm pretty sure we should have you on again sometime, because it was fascinating and it seems like a lot of people got a lot out of it. So again, thank you.
I would love to, because the questions, the back and forward and questions is really good.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's, I think, much more than the presentation, and that even in our main events, that the Q&A sessions often turn out to be much more enlightening and fun and useful than the original presentation before the Q&A started. So thank you for sticking around for a long time and being part of it.
Great. Andre, thank you very much. And, as as a doc, it's very important what you're talking about, because it's not just what we're eating, it's the life stress, it's how are things at work, how's the relationship at home. All those things are critical to our well-being. If you're a bitter person, you could go keto and lose 30 pounds and still be a bitter, nasty person. So I think that's a big picture, saying, hey, look, how are things at home? How are things at work? And one of the things I'm shocked by with my patients, I'll ask them, where's your place of peace? What gives you peace? What gives you joy? And they're like it's a stumper for them sometimes, a lot of the time. And so I think that's an important thing, what you're bringing up, and your talk was very helpful in that, because that's what knocks people off track more than anything. Stress and stress and lack of support at home are the two big things I've seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Superman, guys. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time.
All right, thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thanks, guys.
we'll speak again soon. Bye.
Cheers.
Take care.